Welcome to Whole Recaps. An old, shiny BMW pulled up in front of the bank. Then four masked men with guns came out of the bank. They loaded the bags into the trunk of the BMW and quickly got in. But the driver, Martin, didn't drive, because according to the original agreement, only 3 people could be taken out of here. Now it's obvious that there's one more. When he heard the sirens approaching, the masked boss drew his pistol. He tried to force Martin to drive, but Martin said he was playing by the rules. Besides, this car has a code. No one else can drive it except him. In desperation, the masked boss shot one of his accomplices and threw the body out of the car. At that moment, Martin pressed the start code, and the BMW went straight ahead. It's fitting that an older man with Martin's demeanor should be paired with a performance BMW like this. He managed to get rid of the police as if it were a game. He got the guys to their destination safely, picked up his commission and drove off. The automatic license plate changer had already changed the plates once along the way. Martin cleans the blood from the car and changes the plates again. Then he poured himself a cup of coffee and enjoyed his life. Then the doorbell rang. When he stepped outside, it was Sheriff George. It's Sheriff George, because the car that helped the robbers escape is the same model as Martin's. He came to the door for a routine investigation. George examined the BMW carefully, but Martin had already cleaned up the marks, like a new car from the factory, and there was no evidence left at the scene of the incident. George left with nothing, a few kind words. Turns out Martin was an underground deliveryman who specialized in delivering packages to mobsters. Because he was a special forces soldier, he has high military quality. Plus he has always obeyed the rules of the trade, not prying into the employer's information, not to open the parcels privately. So his quality service has been well received in the industry. After seeing George off, the phone suddenly rang. Another business came in. At the appointed time, Martin arrived at a bar with an eerie, dark atmosphere. The employer needs him this time to deliver a 50-kilo package to Luxembourg, 250 kilometers away. Pickup is tomorrow at 7 a.m. After receiving the deposit, Martin left the bar. The next day Martin arrived at the pickup point right on time. The employer loaded the package into the trunk, and Martin immediately started the car and headed for his destination. Halfway there, the car got a flat tire. Martin had to pull over to the side of the road to get the spare tire out of the trunk and change it. He did not expect to open the trunk. See, the courier is different. Actually will move. There may be a surprise inside. In the spirit of professionalism, Martin pushed the package inside, quickly changed the spare tire and drove on. We stopped at a convenience store for a quick snack. On the way out, Martin grabbed a straw and another drink. Pulling into an open space, he hesitated. Martin finally opened the trunk and unzipped the package, ready to feed the surprise inside. It contained a girl with an oriental face. Then Martin took out a knife. The girl screamed in fear and thought Martin was going to use the knife to enjoy the delicious sashimi. Martin hurriedly used the knife to cut a small hole in the adhesive tape on the girl's mouth. He put a straw into the girl's mouth, and the girl realized Martin's intention. After the girl drank a little bit of the drink, Martin put the girl into the package and drove the car to continue the journey. While driving, the girl kept calling from behind. Martin pulled over again, and the girl said she wanted to go to the bathroom. In a moment of weakness, Martin gave in to her request. Although Martin tied a leash around the girl's body like a pet dog, he didn't expect her to take the opportunity to escape. Martin grabbed the girl like a chicken. Unfortunately, while he was carrying the girl back to the car, 2 patrolmen were checking out his car. He had no choice but to quickly knock them out. After delivering the tasty treat to the recipient and getting the final payment, Martin was on his way out. The consignee suddenly called out to him and asked him to deliver a 1-kilogram silver suitcase to Gunapapa. Martin didn't turn down the job because it was on his way anyway. Halfway through the trip, he stopped at a familiar convenience store to grab a bite to eat and 2 cans of drinks from the vending machine. Unexpectedly at that moment, the car suddenly exploded violently. The huge wave of air sent him flying. Turned out that the silver suitcase contained a time bomb, which was the recipient of the goods to kill him to silence. Angry Martin immediately turned back to the consignee's villa. Like a killing machine, began to kill people everywhere. But the boss, Blackie, isn't here anymore. So Martin grabbed a hardcore-looking Mercedes and smashed through the gate and sped off. Halfway there, Martin realizes that the package of deliciousness is hiding in the car. So he braked hard, threw the girl out of the car and drove off. But in the end, Martin went soft and put the girl in the trunk again. When he got home, Martin found out the girl's name was Archie. Distraught, Martin immediately went to his room to sleep. Meanwhile, the consignee, Blackie, quietly arrived at the hospital. From his wounded men, he learned that Martin had not been killed by the bomb. Fearing that his men would leak the information, Blackie had him killed. When he woke up the next morning, Martin saw that Archie hadn't left and had made a delicious breakfast. Just as Archie opened the door to fetch the milk, he noticed a man standing in the doorway. It turned out to be Sheriff George at the door. George took out his broken license plate and asked Martin where his car had gone. Martin's answer was simple. His car had been stolen while he was out shopping and he was planning to report it to the police. George asked Martin how he got back from being so far away, and then Archie came over and said he'd picked Martin up, and then took George to the garage to look at the car. Luckily, the two of them worked well together and managed to put George off. Before he left, George told Martin to come to the police station at 2 p.m. to make a record. Not long after George left, a rocket suddenly shattered the roof. Then several machine gunners started shooting at the house. Indirectly, rockets were fired, turning the house into a hornet's nest. In desperation, they escaped by diving through a pre-prepared safe passage. When they come up to change, Archie reveals his sexy, rakish body and teases Martin. I know you guys don't like this part, so I'll omit it. They arrived at the police station on time. George asked Martin what happened to his house, who was trying to kill him, but he couldn't get any answers. This left George speechless. Just then, someone called George for a meeting. After George left, Archie immediately used George's computer to skillfully enter the police system's database to find out Blackie's information and print it out. This office efficiency is really high. And halfway there, George suddenly turned back. And when he opened the door, he saw Martin and Archie sitting there honestly. So he sent them out and took some money for them to live on. What Archie didn't realize was that Martin didn't want revenge, because Martin knew that they were already dead men in the eyes of Blackie. So he wanted to start a new life. He also advised Archie to be open-minded and start a new life too. In the old French streets, Archie begins a sensationalized performance in order to get Martin's help. According to Archie's description, Blackie is a snakehead who specializes in helping foreigners smuggle into France. This time he smuggled 400 people into France in a container, including Archie's father. And only Blackie knows the container number. Archie hoped to get Martin's help, and together we could rescue these poor people. In the end, Archie managed to convince Martin. The two sneaked into Blackie's office. The moment Blackie entered, the two of them worked together to subdue him. Martin questioned Blackie why he wanted to kill him, but Blackie said that he had broken the rules first by peeking into the package of delicious. This leaves Martin speechless. Just as he used his gun to force Blackie to give out the container number, the office door opened and in came Archie's father, Jack. It was only then that Martin realized that he had been tricked by Archie and that Jack was the biggest snakehead of all. Blackie was just one of Jack's men. Archie held his father at gunpoint to force him to let the stowaways go, but obviously Archie failed. Martin was the unlucky one. Just as Jack's men were about to kill Martin, the police came, so Blackie knocked Martin out. Peppy told George that Martin was a kidnapper, and then handed him over to George. When Martin woke up, he found himself in jail. Martin, hoping to get George's help, told him everything he knew. After some discussion between the two men, George finally decided to help Martin. He pretended to be held hostage by Martin and managed to help him escape. Martin then sailed his boat to the harbor, and found that the truck had already left with the container, so he rushed to jump on the container, only to be spotted by the driver and thrown off. After a lot of fighting, Martin was able to deal with Blackie's gang of henchmen. Martin found a car and chased after it. Unfortunately, the car started smoking halfway across the street. Was it papier match? Luckily, he found another pesticide-spraying airplane. He was able to catch up with Blackie's convoy. Before jumping, he asked the pilot to tell George to bring his men here. This time, he landed directly on the container, but was soon spotted by Blackie and the others. The two sides had a fierce fight, and succeeded in killing Blackie. Pulled the truck slowly to the side of the road in the wasteland. He didn't realize that Jack had a gun to his head before he even got out of the truck. Jack told his men to keep an eye on Archie. Then he forced Martin to jump off the cliff. At that moment, the gun went off, but it was Jack who fell. But it was Archie who shot him. Turned out that Archie had been saved by George, who had arrived. When she came over, she saw that Martin was in danger, so she panicked and fired. But it was his father who died. Archie was still very upset. Martin could only hug him tightly. By the end of the movie, Archie finally got what he wanted. Archie finally gets his wish and rescues the people in the container. The police will take care of the rest. Well, that's the end of the story. If you like it, please follow me. This is Whole Recaps. See you next time.